Hi there. I have two things I wanted to share with you tonight, and the first is something nice, which is that I have, well, hopefully nice. I have, I can't do this. I'm like, I can't, like it's so hard for me to do three with my fingers for some reason. I have three now that you've seen me look like a moron. I have three books that have come into my collection that I think are great and just sort of weren't what I was looking for. And well, for various reasons, and I'll talk about each one. So I'm going to give them away if you want them. All you have to do is basically let me know you do. Um, I will ship anywhere, but if you're international, that's expensive. So I would ask you to contribute to the shipping. But if you do that, just keep in mind that you may end up paying more for shipping in that case than you would just buying the book. But the first one, I sort of toyed with keeping, and that is this book, which doesn't look normal backward, but this is the Marseille Tarot Revealed by Yoav Ben-Dav. And the reason that I am not keeping this book is that it's essentially the same thing as the open reading. And I love that book, but I've read it. This is it's actually a prettier edition of it. The pages are glossy, and there's full color reproductions of the CBD deck. Um, and it's weighty. It's beautiful. I barely even cracked the spine because pretty quickly I realized that it's the same thing. So that's the first one, and it's a book that I think is amazing, and I already have it. The second one is Tarot for One by Courtney Weber, which is another good book. Just sort of, was not sort of where I'm at, but I think that it's a great book, and I think that if you're looking for something like this, then this is the kind of thing you're looking for, and you should grab it. So that's the second one. The third one is Kitchen Table Tarot, which I really quite liked. I read a lot of this, and again, I think it's really good. The reason I'm giving this one away is that it's largely discussion card by card, and again, that's just not sort of where I'm at. But I loved um, the opening chapters in terms of like the ethics of reading, just you're caring for yourself and your tools spreads. I think it's like I love Melissa Sinova's voice as a writer. She's witty, and she's kind of, she's the kind of person that I wish I had this book when I started reading. So all of those are available if you would like them. I ask nothing in return other than if you do want me to ship to another continent, then that you pay for shipping. But again, if you're considering that, you may want to actually look and see if it's cheaper to just buy it, because that might be the case. But otherwise, I think they're good books, and I think that they belong in someone's collection, and they're just not where I'm at. If I didn't like them, um, I wouldn't bother putting them out into the world. So I think they're good. They're just not. They're just not. I am in a space of trying not to hold on to things that I don't have room for. So that's that. So the second thing I wanted to talk about has been on my mind a lot. After my last video, and that was the video where I looked at this deck, the La Magica Sibylla, which I really think is fun. And I compared it to this deck, the Everyday Oracle. Boop, boop, boop. I just kind of threw those over there. Whatever. I do stuff like that. What I wanted to talk about was this idea, because I actually got mostly nice comments, on that video, but there's something to be said for, whether or not my opinion is disrespectful. Nobody said it was, but I've been thinking about it, and I've been thinking about, God, look how white I am. I've just been thinking in general about what we do as readers of whatever we're reading, tarot or oracles or whatever. And the rules. So this is kind of a part two to the discussion on the rules. And I guess what I wanted to talk about is my sorry, I'm trying to I want to sort of articulate this well. I'm going to put it in simple terms. What I want to talk about for me is like my own feeling, and the idea uh, of orthodoxy versus reform, and I'm sort of appropriating that from Judaism, right? But the alternative phrasing that I found that I could think of was sort of progressive and conservative, but those terms are fraught. Orthodox and Reform feels more appropriate in this way for a couple of reasons. The first is that Orthodoxy, isn't it's not fundamentalism. You know what I mean? It's what it is an adherence to uh, an orthodox way of doing things, a specific based in a long history of doing something, and occasionally, I guess you could say, a more literal. I just feel like I'm going to get into hot water when I'm talking about this stuff, but a more literal interpretation of something. Um, and then a reform view is, obviously the modern approach to something where one says, okay, that's what that meant before, but here we are now. And I don't think that there is a right or wrong, in either of those paths. Um, and having come from a childhood with a fairly orthodox religious upbringing. Again, I wouldn't say fundamentalist necessarily. And again, all these words are so loaded. It's one of the problems with words. It's one of the problems with talking about anything, is that it becomes so fraught, to just say anything. And so, all of this take with a grain of salt. And as just my own sort of feeble attempt to articulate the kinds of things that come up. So I had a sort of Orthodox upbringing, not in Judaism, but in Catholicism. Um, and and out of that, and out of my own life experience, grew, a more reform attitude, uh, because of that, And so when I look at reading anything, divination wise, I'm always going to bring to it kind of a reformer zeal or a reformer's attitude, because um, I've developed an allergy, for lack of a better term, to approaches that rein me in too much. People crave structure, though, do you know? And so that's not to say that because my life experience has gotten me to a reform place, doesn't mean that an orthodox approach is bad, because an orthodox approach provides something too. It provides specifics and it provides rules. And again, I'm just reaching for the words that are coming to me. Parameters, a bounding box, you know what I mean, that says that anything is not possible, and that is attractive to some folks, and I think it's attractive to all folks in some situations. You know what I mean? Like if you could literally have anything for dinner, how would you make up your mind about what to have? But you're bounded in by what's in your fridge, or what's within driving distance, say, or whatever. There are limits, and limits are good, in that way. And same way with with eating in general. Like if we didn't have a limit of fullness, we would keep eating until we exploded. So limits are a good thing, and there are folks in life who appreciate limits in things like this, and things like tarot, and things like divination. And then there are folks who have experienced limits and find a natural resistance to them. And again, that's not a bad thing. It just is their experience. And the reason I'm talking about this is because I have gotten to a place where my reformer's attitude, is just, it's just it's it's active, it's active as fuck. That's just how it is right now for me. And the comparison that I talked about in that Sibylla video was between Lenormand, which I approached with an Orthodox approach that just didn't work for me. And it didn't work so much that now I cannot. I literally, and it's not, I'm not whining, I'm not being bitchy. It's my experience that when I put those cards out and I try to answer a question with them, I cannot make sense of them because all of the orthodoxy, all of the rules, uh, are screaming at me, and I can't get past that. That clearly has been those rules that orthodox, and again, I don't want to like put a pejorative tone on that word. Those rules, that orthodoxy, those bounding boxes have helped almost every Lenormand reader I've encountered. Hence the fact that those rules are so widespread, and there are books, and video, that's working for folks. It didn't work for me, and it's not working for me, and it because I married myself to that specific path. I can't do it. Now that's not to say I'll never be able to do it, but I can't now. It just doesn't work for me. And so as I approach the Sibylla or anything else that I decide to learn, I am taking an unorthodox approach. That's the reality. A reformer or not, it's just how I'm going to do it. And then and there will be folks who say I'm not reading it then. Like if I don't, there are folks who will say that if you don't do Lenormand the right way, you're not reading Lenormand. But I've also heard folks say that if you don't, where did I hear that? I think it was Wald Amberstone in one of their audio courses for the Tarot School, talks about Kabbalah and talks about a friend of his, and they were having a discussion about Kabbalah, and Wald Amberstone said, well, X, Y, and Z, and his friend said, well, that's really interesting, but that's not Kabbalah. You know what I mean? Like, maybe it's not, but maybe it is. You know what I mean? Are the things that we deal with that enlighten us only the things that someone else says they are? That's in the right book? Or, I don't think so. I think personally, and this is where my reformer's attitude comes from. Personally, I think that if it's only what's in that book, if it's only that one way, then it only matters to the people who connect to it that way. And then everyone else gets denied insight that they might find by, dipping their toe in the rules and then saying, oh, okay, but this other thing, and when we say, no, not that other thing, that other thing's wrong, then it negates the insight that I found or you found, you know what I mean, as worth. And I don't think that's helpful. I just don't. I don't think that. But other people, want and desire and like it can't be this one. It can't be A because it has to be B. You know what I mean? Because that stops it from being messy. I want messy. In things like this. When it comes to math, when it comes to surgery, you know what I mean? I don't want my doctor to experiment on me. If they're healing me, what I don't want is like, well, it could be this, but it's probably that, and I feel like it's, no, I want to know that it's this, and I want you to treat it like that. With something like tarot or any oracle or divination method, so much is up to the user anyway. So much is based on the practitioner. I don't care if your approach is orthodox or unorthodox. If the question that I'm needing insight into is clarified or light is shed on it, regardless of what kind of card, regardless of what kind of system. And it's not to denigrate the work of people who have dug into and really loved those and gotten into those systems and mastered them. Awesome. And if you are that kind of reader and you're going to give me a great reading because you have that kind of research and that kind of mastery of those systems, perfect. And if you're not, and you're going to give me a good reading anyway, perfect. Because that's, at the end of the day, what matters to me. isn't the system, it's the answer. I don't, I don't care how you get here. Just get here if you can, Bonnie Raitt. Like, just, I need an answer. I don't care what the system is. If I'm in anxious mode and I'm like, I need to know whether I should accept this job, I don't care how you get there. I want to know what the energy around that is. And that's me. Some people, again, aren't, because we're all different. So, um, this is kind of, a long ramble, but I'm posting this for two reasons. One, to sort of hopefully mitigate anyone out there who sees anything I post and says, oh, well, that guy's an asshole because all of this stuff I've spent my life studying, he just called into question. That's not it. But also for anyone out there who is like me and has more of a reformer mind for whatever reason, do it. Someone's going to say you're doing it wrong. Someone's going to say you're doing it right. Someone's going to say you're not doing it. Doesn't matter. Are you getting what you need out of it? That, to me, is what matters. Final thoughts on this whole thing, and maybe this is just a justification of my own reformer attitude. All of the systems that we're using largely right now, whether it's Lenormand or whether it's, sorry, my back hurts, or whether it's tarot or anything, all of these things came at a different time, and the kinds of things that, especially in non-tarot decks, because tarot itself, tarot is weird, you know what I mean? Like, it's weird that, I don't think at any point when tarot was popular as a game did the Trumps, for example, represent much of life, you know what I mean? They just, like, who goes around opening a lion's mouth, like that. The Trumps in tarot don't kind of reflect life, and the cares of life, I mean, they do, and we've given them all of that, but they don't. But these things, you know what I mean? Like, we live in rooms. We don't send letters, but we communicate. We send emails and texts. We get gifts. We know people who are assholes. We feel melancholy. These are things that are in life. And that came from the life of the time, you know what I mean? We've still got soldiers, we've still got enemies, we still have priests. But these cards, or Lenormand a little weirdly kind of less, because Lenormand is, though it's not tarot, sorry, it's a little snarky. Hey, I'm snarky. It's not tarot, and the things in Lenormand are a little bit more symbolic than these Sibylla situations, and even the Kipper card situations. What the cards depict, the situations, and the meanings that were assigned to them, even with Lenormand, represent a life that we're not living anymore. You know what I mean? Like, you just have to look at the cards to say this is not what modern childhood looks like. Thieves now are less likely to crawl into our window than they are to steal our credit card number, and not even steal our credit card number directly, but do it through some technology. And so why I feel permission, beside the fact that I get to do whatever I want because I'm an autonomous adult, right? Is that we're not living this life. This melancholy isn't melancholy as we know it today. Melancholy today might be, I didn't get enough Facebook likes, or someone was kind of bitchy on my blog, or I didn't get the raise I want. You know what I mean? Like, that's melancholy today, and it doesn't look like this. It may feel like this, but it doesn't really look like this now. And so I think the concerns of modern life are different than whenever this deck was created, when tarot was created. And so the reason why I have a bit more of a reformer's attitude too is purely because I need in my readings to reflect life as it appears today. You know what I mean? It's unlikely, for example, that I will, encounter a querent whose husband is lost at sea. Maybe. I do live in New England, and there is a fishing community still here, so that could happen. You know what I mean? But we don't have widows' walks anymore. You know, things are different. Um, and so the lines that I, as a reader, have to draw between whatever's in, this pack of cards, between this letter, we still get letters, but they're bills. When we get mail, it's usually bills. When we get communication from friends, it's an email. Um, so I have to draw. As a reader, regardless of the system I'm using, need to draw lines between what is likely to be sort of a life that doesn't exist anymore and a life that does. And that's why I give myself permission to say the prison card is probably less about an actual arrest and more about feeling stuck. Or whatever. I give myself permission to do that. And the other thing that I will say as well is that if Atea, for example, or Papus, or any of the people who gave us if any of them knew what we're doing with the cards now, they would say, that's not what I was talking about. That's not what we were doing. What you're using it for? What? Journaling? You're doing what with this? Because they lived a different life and they had different needs. You know what I mean? And we've reformed it. And for all the crap that tarot gets, because we're kind of meaner to tarot now, I think, than when we started. We say it's not as practical, it's da-da-da-da-da, and I think it can be. I think we have reformed it in a way that has made it maybe less practical, because what we needed from it was spiritual development. And now we can reform it back if we want to. We can reform it in whatever way we want. But if Atea or whoever looked at what we're doing now, or if they observed one of our readings, they say, no, that's not what that means. You know what I mean? That means that the hooker gave him syphilis. I mean, those are that's the reality of life in 18th, 17th century France. You know what I mean? Like, that's what they would have been concerned about. You're going to lose your head. We're less concerned about that now. We're more concerned about, like, is so-and-so cheating on me with someone he met on Facebook? That's life now, So anyway, I will stop rambling, but I just am throwing this out there into the world as we do. These are my thoughts on sort of Orthodox approaches and Reform approaches to tarot or Sibylla or Lenormand or anything. And what I say as a Reform-minded person is that if you are not getting what you need out of a system, change the system, Who's going to come and get you? Are the Lenormand police going to come and, beat down your door and confiscate your cart? No. You know why? Because there aren't any Lenormand police. That's just that. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. But I do hope this is useful. I hope it sparks conversation and whatnot. And again, to underline my overall thesis that I don't want to disrespect or devalue an Orthodox approach, until that Orthodox approach, I guess, stops progress from happening and stops people learning, because they can't make the orthodoxy work for them. I'm an English major, and I believe in slang. I majored in English and writing, and I love what people do to language. I love slang. I love when people and that's partly because I'm a playwright too, but I love when people say the wrong thing, or they give new color and meaning to a word. A pedantic person will tell you that the word moot, as in that's a moot point, actually means debatable. It means that it's worth debating, or it's something that can be debated. That word has evolved over time, in part because people didn't know what it meant and they heard other people use it. The word now means it's not worth talking about. It's completely... A grammarian would say that word is skunked because it doesn't mean what it's supposed to. People don't use it that way. Like nonplussed. People use nonplussed the opposite way of what it literally means. And they'll say, well, that's a skunked word because the meaning's unclear. Well, it's unclear if you're stuck in, 50, 100 years ago. Everyone now hears that's a moot point and knows exactly what it means. What it doesn't mean is what grammarians will tell you it means. But the world has moved on from that. So now I think, the bottom line is it doesn't mean debatable anymore. It means it's not worth talking about. Nonplussed sounds like you're not surprised, when in fact you are nonplussed means you are surprised. Nobody uses that way, So is the word skunked? Well, it's only skunked if you're stuck in the dictionary. Language changes. The word girl used to mean a male child. So, things change. We grow, we develop, we make things into what we need to make them into. And I think that's fine, And if you're still doing it the old way, that doesn't mean you're bad or old-fashioned, unless you're stopping other people from doing it their way, I guess. And that's, again, just my opinion. So, I thought this was going to be such a quick video, and here I am 25 minutes in. That's me. So, hey, that's that. Have a good week. Bye.